But there are a couple of things that we can look at in this passage to talk about how we deal with our burdens God's way. Here's thought number one. You ready? You might want to write this down, or you have the app open. If you have a burden, or maybe you know someone in your family, maybe you just shared Thanksgiving meal with them, and they're carrying a burden. Here's the first thing we need to be reminded of as we look at Zechariah and Elizabeth, is that even righteous people carry burdens. Write that down. Even righteous people carry and have burdens. A lot of times we can, if we aren't careful, we can begin to think, you know, man, if I go to church and if I give a tithe, if I do this, if I pray right, if I act right, I do good, I'll never have a struggle. I'll never have a struggle. I want you to know that that's false. That is wrong. That is a struggle. That righteous people struggle. It's hard for us to comprehend in our mind that we serve a God, that we walk and serve and love a God and are faithful to a God. I can do everything God has called me to do, and I can have a burden. The reality of it is, righteous people carry burdens. On Friday afternoon, I stood right here with our congregation, many in our congregation, and we did a memorial service for a man named Dan Crum. Faithful deacon, loving father, incredible husband. Wonderful servant of the church, minister of the church. Years ago, back as we start construction, we've closed those doors. If you walked in those doors over there, Dan probably handed you a creek guide and gave you a big old smile and a hug or something like that. And right here, in here, we held a memorial service funeral for Dan, a young man with young children who, let me tell you what, when he found out he had cancer, he goes, I don't know what God's going to do, but he's going to get the glory. And he served, and he was faithful, and he loved, and he dug into God's word and dug in, and to the end, he was righteous. But even righteous people carry burdens. Look at it in Luke chapter 1, verse 5. Let's look at Zechariah and Elizabeth. It says, in the time of Herod the king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, and his wife was named Elizabeth. Look at what verse 6 says. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God. Man, Zechariah was a faithful priest. Elizabeth was a faithful wife. Man, they had journeyed with this burden of being barren and childless, which in those days, I will promise you, all the ladies looked around and they either felt sorry or a little bit of condemnation for Elizabeth, that what have you done that God has not blessed you with a son or with a child? All the other priests, many perhaps some of the other religious leaders of the day, looked at Zechariah, perhaps thought, I wonder what he's done. Anybody remember a story in the Old Testament of a guy named Job? Job was a righteous man. He worshiped God, and he lost his family and his health and his job in a matter of about 24 hours. And how many of you remember what Job's friends did? They showed up and said, hey, Job, level with us. What did you do wrong? And Job said, I didn't do anything wrong. They said, hey, listen, we're your buddies. You can tell us. And he goes, I haven't done anything wrong. They said, listen, man, tell the truth. Shame the devil. That's what they were saying. What have you done wrong? And right here we see Zechariah and Elizabeth, who appear to have been faithful from their youngest days to their oldest days, and they are still burdened and they are still barren. So listen, even righteous people carry burdens. So notice what it says. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God. God saw them as righteous. Boy, the Pharisees were righteous in the sight of other Pharisees. These people were so faithful. They were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and His decrees blamelessly. In other words, if God said it, they did it. But yet they were still barren. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive. And they were, listen to this, both very old. This had been a burden that they had prayed for since the day they were married. We would like a child. Zechariah wants someone to carry on his name. Elizabeth wants a child to share in the joy. And you can look in the Old Testament and all the way through the New Testament. Barrenness was something that the ladies wept and prayed for, and men longed for a child that would carry on their name. And it was no different with this righteous couple. So I want you to know, if you're here today and you are bearing up under a burden, and you also think that you are walking faithfully to God and keeping all of His commands, it's not a discipline. It's not judgment of God. It's just a reality of living in a sinful world that even righteous people bear up under burdens. Let me give you another truth along with that. Not all burdens are equal. You might want to write that down. Not all burdens are equal. Man, if you've been observant and if you watch people, even people that walk in faith and walk in the Lord, you have seen that some people just seem to be constantly carrying around massive burdens, maybe their past is a struggle and their family of origin is a struggle, and their job, it always seems to be turning over, and they're in the wrong field and it's a struggle. And someone else, they have burdens, but you look at their burdens and you think they're always blessed and their kids are awesome and their relationship is awesome and their job is awesome and their checkbook is filled. Not all burdens are created equal. Hey, there have also been times as a pastor, and my guess is you're that way, that you're in one of those seasons, and some people, they're sharing burdens of a brokenness and a heartbroken idea, and someone else said, let's just share all of our burdens, and someone shares this burden that just make you weep. And someone over here will say, my dog doesn't seem to be doing well. And you're like, well, those burdens are not exactly equal. The truth is, there might be someone over here that you're carrying a burden that it feels like the world is on your shoulders. There might be some people over here that you're just blessed and you're rolling through the world. So understand, not all burdens are equal. So thought number one is this: even righteous people have to deal with burdens.